Thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is John Austin, and I am the Director of the Wildlife Division with the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. We are here tonight to talk about Vermont's dam safety regulations, the fact that the Agency of Natural Resources owns a fair number of dams that need to come into compliance with those regulations, how we're going to go about doing that, and in certain instances where we have beavers interacting with these human-made dam structures, how we're going to manage that intersection between the dams, dam safety regulation compliance, and beaver conservation and management. We have all three departments within the agency represented here tonight. We have the Fish and Wildlife Department, Department of Environmental Conservation, who is responsible for ensuring compliance with the dam safety rules, and we have folks from the Vermont Department of Forest Parks and Recreation, because all three departments own dams. I'm going to introduce everyone, and then I'm going to turn it over to our facilitator for the evening, Delia Clark, who will explain the flow of the meeting tonight. We're looking forward to hearing from all of you, your thoughts and ideas and questions on how we're going to deal with coming into compliance with the dam safety regulations and deal with beaver management. So we have folks here who will explain the dam safety regulations and their implications to the dams that the agency owns. We have folks here who will explain beaver ecology and management and how that intersects with dam maintenance and management. And then Paul Hamlin, our Lands and Habitat Program Manager, will talk about the steps that we plan to take to consider various alternatives for how we're going to deal with these circumstances. Then we're going to open it up to all of you. You can ask questions and share your thoughts and ideas. So let me introduce our team. Over here we have Steve Hanna with the Department of Environmental Conservation. He's with the Dam Safety Program. Standing next to Steve is Paul Hamlin, our Lands and Habitat Program Manager, oversees all things lands and habitat with the Fish and Wildlife Department. We have Louis Bushy. He's a State Lands Forester with Forest Parks and Recreation. We have Tim Appleton, who is our Public Lands Section Chief in the Fish and Wildlife Department. David Sawsville, our Wildlife Program Manager in the Fish and Wildlife Department. Take off my glasses so I can see here. Mike Wakrowski, who oversees our Fishing Access Area Program in the Fish and Wildlife Department. We have two of our Warden Service colleagues here this evening, Warden Searcy and Warden Hazard, joining us tonight. And over here, my colleagues, Brian Furphy, our Fur Bearer Project leader and wildlife biologist, and Mr. Josh Morse, who is one of our outreach experts. Did I miss anybody? Oh, and of course, the facilitator for this evening, our friend and colleague Delia Clark, who I'm going to invite up here to explain how all of this is going to unfold this evening. Mr. Hamlin, have I missed anything that I should share before I pass the mic? Or is that good? I can reinforce, so I think I just said, so the plan this evening is for us to share with you, here are the dam safety regulations, here are the circumstances with some of the dams that we own, here's Beaver Ecology 101 and how that will inform how we're going to come into compliance with these dam safety regulations, and then here are the steps that we're looking at taking in developing a plan for how we're going to deal with these circumstances and comply with the dam safety regulations. You're then going to take the opportunity to ask questions and share your thoughts about what you've heard tonight. We're going to record all of that, and then we are going to prepare a responsiveness summary so we have time to carefully consider everything that you wish to share with us tonight, and then we will make that responsiveness summary available to everybody who participates this evening. Sounds good? All right, Delia, you want to take it over? Sure thing.
Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you, and hello, everybody. I'm really excited about being here tonight because I believe so strongly in the power of Vermonters coming together and talking about things together, and that's such a great way to move forward as a state. So I was honored when the Fish and Wildlife group asked me to come be here. I'm based in Taftsville, Vermont, which is part of Woodstock, and I was born in St. Johnsbury, grew up in Burlington, so I've been traveling, living in different parts of the state. I'm going to repeat some of what John just said. There are really two goals for tonight's meeting. The first is to provide the public, those who are in attendance, as well as those who are watching this on a video, and those who are going to be receiving any of the written question lists, information related to the management of ANR-owned dams and beavers. So basically, it's an informational meeting. The other goal is to collect any remaining questions, anything that doesn't get addressed in these presentations, so that we can pull that together, and by we, I mean people who know what they're talking about, not me, for future development of a question and answer sheet that'll be finished by June 1st. So we want to put out what's known, find out what you still wonder, and then pull all that together. And we'll be doing this again Thursday night at Middlebury High School, trying to reach two different parts of the state, so there'll be a lot of opportunities to gather information. There are a few group agreements that are on the agenda you have for today, and that I also wrote up here that I wanted to go over. Basically, you learned all these things in kindergarten, but it's just good to have agreements that we all agree to as we're working together. The first is to listen carefully for understanding. So often when we're listening, we're kind of preparing a rebuttal in our mind of what we want to say as soon as the person stops for a breath. So what we want to encourage you to do is really, and we'll all be trying to do, is really try to understand what people are saying. And if you wonder, ask. There are 3 ways to ask questions tonight, and I'll say them now, and then we'll go over them again later. After all the presentations, we'll collect questions, and I'll be writing them all up on the flip chart, so you can say them out loud to the group, and I'll write them down. And you also are welcome to write questions on the sticky notes in the middle of your table. There are sticky notes and pens in the middle of every table, and there are more over here if you don't need them. You can write down your questions, especially if it's a detailed question. That might be a good thing to do. And just stick them up on the sheet over there by the door. So we'll collect questions there. And you can email questions. So you can email questions to the address that I've got written over there, and I'll have it on the sheet here in a minute, so that you can, if it's something that you think takes more explanation. So if you wonder about something, ask it, because other people are probably wondering it too. And if you ask it, you'll help build the understanding of everybody. The second point is to speak your truth. In asking your question, say what you know, but do it in a respectful and a courteous way. We're all trying to be in a civil society and respect where one another are coming from, so we'll use our finest and kindest words. The third point is to focus on the issues and not personalize. There are a lot of wildlife professionals in the room, and as well as expertise in all kinds of areas that you all bring, and we want to recognize that and not personalize any of our comments, but just assume that we're really talking about the issue at hand. Also, when asking your question at the end, if you could self-edit, that would be helpful. Sort of think in advance a little bit about what you want to say, so it leaves enough time for everybody to be able to ask their questions. I'll be writing the questions down on the flip charts unless you write them on sticky notes or email them. So make sure to check to make sure I get it right. If it's going to become the question that gets answered, so make sure that it's written down correctly. And then again, we're going to hold all questions till after all the presentations. We have a small enough group tonight that I thought it might be nice to just quickly go around and have people that haven't already been introduced by John Austin just say your name and the town you're from. So maybe we can sort of sweep across the room this way and give everyone who's here as a member of the public a chance. Just name and town. So I'm Delia Clark. I'm from Taftsville.
I'm Evan. I'm from Essex.
Nice and loud.
I'm Evan. I'm from Essex.
Is there anybody over there? Yeah. Are you guys? Oh, okay. Yes. Thanks. Mm-hmm. That's okay. Mm-hmm. Now we'll do you again.
I'm Jill from Sharon.
Thanks.
John Peters from Haven.
And I think that's everybody. Good. Well, again, thank you so much for coming. As John said, we're going to have 3 presentations on overview of new dam safety and rules, beaver biology, ecology, and best management practices, and options for managing dams with beaver activity. And then when those 3 presentations are done, we'll collect questions, and then we'll wrap. So that's the flow of our evening. Any questions about where we're going before we start? Does that all make sense? Good. Well, then I'm going to turn this over with no further ado to Steve Hanna.
Thank you. Good evening. Stephen Hanna, as you know. So I'm a civil engineer with the Dam Safety Program. A brief overview of our program. We're located in Environmental Conservation Department. The mission statement's a little different than much of the agency, whereas we're focused on the public safety as well as the environment. We have the responsibilities, obviously, for dam regulation. As mentioned, we also have ownership responsibilities. The program has grown recently to what you see there. Prior to that, and in 2022, we added the 2 engineers, and then this year we added the program manager and a technician. We regulate dams that are non-federal, non-power dams, and we're proceeding with rules. We do own approximately 13 dams, including the 3 flood control dams in East Barre, Wrightsville, and Waterbury. So we're also charged with the oversight and administration of the inventory, and so we have 1,119 records. Always seems to change from slide to slide, presentation to presentation. High hazard dams, that's where the failure of that dam is going to most likely end up with a loss of life. The significant hazard is more limited to property damage. There's no expected or no probable loss of life. There can always be a loss of life. Low hazard, there's less damage and also no expected loss of life. And then minimal hazards are similar to lows. They're just impound less water. And so therefore we're categorized as minimal hazards. The PUC is the Public Utility Commission. They regulate 21 of the hydropower dams that are not regulated by FERC. The majority, 82, are regulated by the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. There are some other federal dams, such as the Army Corps dams. They have flood control dams over in the Connecticut River Basin, and also there's a few in the national parks. One of our big roles is regulatory. We do periodic inspections. We, the state, do the vast majority of those inspections as opposed to putting it on to the owners. In other states, they do that. We personally like the interaction with dam owners and also having our own eyes on the dam, knowing how things are at, and just to have a better feel for the condition of dams in the state. Dam orders or permits, if you're going to alter or build a dam, there aren't many dams being built these days, but if you're going to alter a dam or remove a dam, that requires an order to do that work. It requires a professional engineer to develop the plan and submit to us, which we review and then would issue the order on that. So, how dam safety came to pass, there's the existing law, but we did not have a whole lot of specificity to that. We did not have rulemaking authority. We were more, except for dire circumstances, we didn't really have authority to go out and make somebody do something, make a change in their dam or in their operation. And Vermont has been lagging behind nationally in federal standards and also the other surrounding states. So, aging inventory, all the dams, like the rest of us are aging, and the vast majority of the dams are older than 50 years. And there's this lack of authority to compel action has led to what we would describe as benign neglect. It's fine until it's not, kind of not attitude, but just that was the reality. We did get rulemaking authority and by the statute in 2018. We've adopted the administrative rules. The rulemaking, I should say, is not, in one sense, is a drastic change because we didn't have rules. The other sense is it's just codifying or putting into the rules what we've kind of done the whole time anyways. And the same with the standards rules that, bringing things up to national standards. A lot of dams now are being, we call them comprehensive inspections or assessments, doing a detailed deep dive into, what's the condition of the dam, how is it built, how does it compare to, modern standards. So, again, we're looking for the safe management and operations of dams. This is going to be a significant financial undertaking required of dam owners. Nothing's cheap these days, and we were working with dam owners to come into compliance with this. Also working our own dams and also Fish and Wildlife's and Forests and Parks dams as well. We're kind of moving more into the three departments are under the same agency, and we're kind of going towards more of a central management system. So it's kind of helping each other, with the different aspects and our different expertises. So again, compliance with inspection results is a big thing. Previously we would go to and do an inspection and write up an inspection report, and then some owners would do work on the dams and many would not. Classic is the dam has never shown, and it hasn't failed, it's fine, and it's kind of hard to get people to understand that there's something going on, as you can see in the photo, inside the dam that you really need to be aware of and need to maintain these. And it's just kind of many things that people have inherited dams from the family, and there's never been that owner's manual of like, this is what you need to do. So as been mentioned, the agency, Natural Resources, owns roughly 100 dams, and we're trying to get more centralized in our management of those. As typical tasks, they are listed there, with increasing weather patterns. We're definitely trying to get out to look at dams for more often, getting making sure they're in decent shape, spillways are cleared, so if there's any, water can flow out the way flow out of the dam the way it was designed. There's a map. If you go, there's also a handout there. If you go online, you can see, use these codes for the dams. It was just, we tried a couple different ways and it just kept making a mess. This was the best, and I apologize if it's confusing, but this is the best way to get that amount of information. And then if you go into our Vermont dam inventory and you can enter those numbers, that'll bring you to that dam and that specific location. So again, we own 100 dams and they're not all in great shape. 40% of the dams are in poor or unsatisfactory condition. 80% are 50 years old or older. Increasing frequency of the storms, as I mentioned, so the dams are asked to withstand more and do more than they have in the past. A very rough estimate is $25 million to bring the dams up to existing standards, and that excludes the flood control dams. The flood control dams were in it's called a cooperative partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers. So there's some cost sharing there. There's a lot of expertise, but it also means things tend to move slowly with the federal and the state too, but especially with the Army Corps. But it would be very tough to do that work without them. Some of the upcoming work we have, we've been for a couple of years been doing maintenance contracting, brushing and mowing and clearing of debris, and some minor work and repairs. We've got some rehabilitation projects going on up Lake Carmi up in Franklin, Noise Pond in Groton, Silver Lake in Barnard. The comprehensive inspection or assessments, looking into seeing what's going on with the dam. There's the hydrology and hydraulics. When it rains and comes to the dam, that's the hydrology, and how it gets out of the dam is the hydraulics. So we're looking to see, with these new larger storms and weather patterns, what's going on in these dams, where it may have been fine when they built it, 50, 100 years ago. It doesn't meet current standards. Doing the geotechnical, seeing what the dam is made up of with soil borings. Emergency action plans, they're required for the high hazard and significant hazard dams. Basically, it's a plan to implement when there's an issue there. It can go from just it's an unusual event, and we got to pay more attention to the dam, or the dam owner needs to pay more attention to the dam, figure out what's going on, and then up to it's like, well, the dam is failing, we need to evacuate downstream. That emergency action plan, it requires the owner to make the initial calls, but not do any of the downstream, like evacuations or anything. It's like the owner's focus is on the dam. Things that I've mentioned before are kind of implied, the mowing, the brushing, repairing animal burrows, minor erosion, riprap. Riprap is stone. You can see at the Kent Pond there is this typically angular stone that locks together to protect against erosion. And maintenance issues related to beavers. As we probably all know, you remove the debris, but if the beaver is active, they're almost there behind you. So 13% of all regulated dams, these are based on observations in our inspection reports. So 13% of all regulated dams have some beaver issues, and issues can range from just the debris clogging the spillway, or to an actual dam built on top of the man-made dam. And then 21% of our dams have that. So the issues, it restricts the spillway capacity and the ability to pass, higher flows. It results in higher normal water levels, and that puts stress on the dam. And then, with the dam is stressed, that increases the risk and chances that it could impact, public safety and property. So some of the alternatives, such as the beaver deceivers, it's an inadequate hydraulic capacity for storms and limited effectiveness at man-made dams. It's kind of there's lots of different ways to try to describe it, but basically, if you have a glass or whatever that you're drinking out of, and you put your straw in it, you can only pull out that much. The dam is designed to have that full opening. So on the typical sunny day, it's fine. The water level is just staying there. But if you have any significant inflow, that it starts to back up and it's not operating as designed. So that's why beaver deceivers typically are not, I shouldn't say typically, they are not, appropriate to be put on a dam. A lot of screens, they are on dams as well as you see them as culverts, but of course, we're here about dams. They can work. Again, it's a maintenance headache. You've got to be out there. You want to have it pass, as it says here, pass the small stuff, but also exclude the larger stuff. And if they're not maintained, then the beaver dam and debris comes up, and then they just start going over it, and so then you have a beaver dam built around your screen. Beaver removal is you work with the local game wardens and a licensed trapper to remove the beavers. Some other options are modify the existing dam to accommodate the beaver activity. It's not an easy undertaking. You'd have to really redesign your dam to not make it attractive to the beaver, to block it, and then also maintaining the water level. And then removal of the man-made dam. The beavers most likely will come back. I'm no beaver expert, but that is as often what happens after a removal of a dam. There will be some action, or other dam will come back, and we do not regulate that at all. Well, I as dam safety don't do that. It's not like, oh, you removed your dam, you got to keep this clear. It's like if the beavers come back, that's totally separate from what I do. So hope that was informative. Thank you. I'm not sure who's next.
Next we have Bree Furphy and Tyler Brown. Together?
Just me.
Next we have Bree Furphy. Sorry about that.
Do-si-do. All right. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Bree, or Brian Furphy. I'm the Fur Bearer Project Leader for the Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife. I suspect many of you are here because you would like to learn about beavers, or you enjoy beavers. So I'm going to share a little bit of information about beaver biology, ecology, and the best management practices that we have. Oh, there we go. So a little bit about beavers. So they're a semi-aquatic mammal. They're not fully aquatic, but they have several adaptations to living in the water. They're torpedo-shaped. They have a flat tail, and they have webbed hind feet. So even though they spend a lot of the time on the water, they also go on land. It's not unusual to see them on land, going from one area to another, but they're very clumsy on land. So they also have nose channels and ear channels that close automatically when they dive underneath the water. And they have fur-lined lips, which is an adaptation to cold water. And they exchange as much as 75% of air in their lungs, which is pretty unique. Humans, relative to what beavers can do, we can only exchange 15%. So that means that beavers can stay underwater for approximately 15 minutes. So here's a schematic of what a typical beaver colony will look like. You have your beaver dam, you have the food cache, and then the dam itself. And then this here is just showing an example of what it looks like with ice as well, for those that are curious. So beavers, they build lodges, they build bank dens, and typically that's layers and layers of bark and willow and mud. They'll also use alders and maples. And they're most notorious for building multiple levels of lodges. So typically they're very big, they stand out, a lot of people see them. And with these multiple levels, they have one area where they have the sleeping chamber and then another area where they feed. They have multiple entrances and exits to their lodges, and this is because of depredation, to reduce the risk of depredation. And then each colony typically supports about 2 adults, 2 juveniles, and then 2 to 4 kits born each year. And then when those juveniles get to be about like 2 years old or so, mom and dad will kick them out. They typically don't disperse terribly far. They typically have a home range of approximately a ½ mile. And with that, again, it kind of varies a little bit, but they're also trying to avoid depredation. They're sexually mature at 2 years, and they mate in January through March, and they can live to approximately 8 to 10 years old. Beavers, as we all know, are a keystone species, so they're ecosystem engineers. The dams themselves are the base of the food web, so they can create really amazing wetlands. And this increases the abundance of plankton, phytoplankton, which is algae, zooplankton, microinvertebrates, fish, birds, and several predator or mammal species. They're not usually a barrier to aquatic passage, so that's another unique aspect of beaver-created wetlands. And they can do this incredibly fast. So a beaver colony can build a 35-foot dam in a week. That just goes to show how incredibly fast and productive they can be. And they're also, these wetlands are incredibly important because they not only support a diversity of wildlife, but if you're looking at kind of the biodiversity crisis, you could see that there's several studies that show that that beaver-created wetlands have, for example, more than 92 different bird species in 4 different wetlands. So that's a pretty amazing habitat feature to support that much. Some of the benefits of beaver-created wetlands. So the wetlands are a filter of our aquatic habitats. The dams slow the water flow, so that helps to lessen the impacts of drought by storing water and recharging groundwater. They can mitigate flooding and erosion downstream during periods of heavy rain, and they reconnect rivers with floodplains. Importantly, beaver-created wetlands are cyclic, so this means that they go through a natural cycle. Typically, when beavers move into an area, they will go ahead and they'll build their dams, and they live there until they deplete the resources there. So when that happens, they will abandon the site and move to another place where they can find food. And then what happens as a result is that the remaining land is porous and it retains less water, becomes more nutrient rich, and it reverts back to what it was. And so that exposed sediment, with being as rich as it is, creates a lot of really good habitat for species, even after they leave. A little history. So to better understand where we are today with beavers in Vermont, it's important to know that beavers were really important to European settlement in North America, especially here in the Northeast. And they were always in high demand because of the high quality of their pelts. They were always in high demand because they can be used for multiple different purposes. You can eat beaver, you can use their fur for multiple reasons. There's several different important parts of beaver that were utilized. They're also relatively easy to catch. And I don't know how many of you watch Yellowstone, but as an example of the big Stetson hats that you see out west, those are made out of felt, and those are actually made out of beaver felt. So it goes to show that those big top hats in history, and also what you see today in those Stetson hats, those are all made from beaver felt. So there's no other species that's been as influential a European settlement than beavers, and this is really, really important. So when Europeans first landed in the New World, the Native Americans were using the first knives and bone tools, and this was important to the Europeans because the Native Americans had superior tools, and they wanted them. So what did? They traded. So the furs became the currency for that trade. And for example, 10 beaver pelts would actually buy 1 gun. And so that's what rapidly occurred, and that heavily influenced the Western expansion of European settlement. Here in the Northeast, Vermont went from 90 to 95% forest to 30% forest by 1850. And it influenced basically all of our wildlife. This is around the time when we start to see catamounts disappear from the state, when we start to see wolves disappear from the state, and it's a dramatic change on the landscape. Most of our iconic species were disappearing, but it turned out that beavers were actually gone from the landscape way before that. Again, because of that unregulated heavy trade for parts and pelts. And many of our roads and infrastructure was built at a time when beavers didn't exist or were not abundant on the landscape. And so that creates opportunities for conflict, unfortunately. And in Vermont, we have over 15,000 road miles in town and state right-of-ways. This does not include just driveways and other avenues that you can get down. And there's 116 culverts and bridges classified in Vermont. And a lot of these roads, they follow the streams and they follow the rivers, and because of that, it creates opportunities for conflict. The beaver population, even with regulated trapping, has continued to grow. So in 1910, the beaver was officially protected here in Vermont. They were reintroduced in 1921 to 1937 from New York and Maine. And then when we began doing surveys shortly after that, you could see that in 1941, in the first survey, we had approximately 500 beavers. 3 years later, we had a little over 1,000. And then just a few years later, it skyrocketed up to 8,000. So it goes to show that these populations can actually increase incredibly fast. In Vermont, we have the Beaver Wetland Conservation Project. We've produced a document called the Beaver Best Management Practices, and that provides on-site technical assistance to those who are experiencing beaver damage. It was originally written in 2002, and it's a resource for landowners and other people who are experiencing problems. And so the goal for this program is to maintain high quality beaver-created wetland habitat, and when possible, resolve the conflict that has occurred. One of the many tools that we have in our toolbox to reduce conflict is to use beaver baffles and exclusion fences. They're great options to resolve any of the conflicts that are related to flooding. The baffles are installed through beaver dams to help control the water level, and the exclusion fences are built around the culverts to prevent any sort of damming occurring at the culverts. And importantly, the baffles and the fences are not an option for man-made dams. The baffles would not actually prevent the beavers from damming. As we said before, they will likely come back and continue to do the work that they had originally done. We wouldn't be able to handle that volume of water. And the fences, they also obstruct water flow. They're not exactly conducive for building. And so this is actually published in our best management practices, and would recommend for everyone to take a look at those online if you have an opportunity. And importantly, relocation is also not an option here. Relocation is not only illegal, but it also creates an abundance of issues, whether it's you're taking one animal to another place that could be a carrier of disease. You could be influencing the social dynamics that already exist. You could be putting that animal at risk, at conflict or increased conflict with the beavers that are already there, because they're extremely territorial. Could be creating an issue for somebody else where beavers actually were not before. And like I mentioned, it's highly illegal. So it's not a best management practice here in Vermont. Out west, you'll see that people have the option of relocating beavers because there's areas where beavers do not exist at all for many, many miles. But here in Vermont, we have beavers that are incredibly abundant and widespread throughout the state. They're in every watershed. And so reintroducing a beaver into a watershed that already has beavers is not going to work. I think that's all I really had. That's it. All right. And now, Paul Hamlin.
Can't find my cursor.
Give you a hand. It's kind of finicky.
It is. It's
It is.
very sensitive.
It is very sensitive.
All right. Let's start it up.
There you are.
Okay. So this will be quite brief because I'm really just going to reiterate some of the information that's already been presented by Steve and Bree. First, to recap the situation and the information that was provided by Steve and Bree, all dam owners in the state of Vermont, A&R and other dam owners, must comply with the dam safety rules that were passed by the Vermont legislature. The problem is we have about 21 dams that have beaver debris and beaver activity at various levels that are impacting the functions of those dams. So we have to address that problem. As the dam owners, and A&R is responsible for bringing the dams into compliance. And so given our mission at A&R and the fact that it's the law that we must comply with, to not address the problem is not an option. So that's off the table. We have to do something. We're going to carefully consider our options, and after evaluating everything that all the information that we can, and each dam is unique and individual, but we are going to take actions that we believe are reasonable and responsible. And we care what you think. That's why we're having this meeting tonight. That's why we're going to take your questions, and we're going to very carefully consider our responses to them. We might end up taking actions that you consider to be, undesirable or adverse or impact your recreational activities, but it's not because we don't care. We do care what you think. We're going to take the actions that we need to do to comply with all the considerations of cost and ecological considerations and everything else that we have to take into account. So having said that, there are basically sort of two categories of options, short-term and long-term options. The dam safety enforcement starts taking effect July 1. So we have some short-term options. So if we consider do nothing, I already covered that, it's not an option. You have to comply with the state law. Best management practices like beaver deceivers, both Steve and Bree already covered that. Steve's example, I love it. You got a little teeny straw, works most of the time, but when you have that big flood, the straw can't handle the volume, and so that's not an option. Beaver deceivers can't handle the volume of water that we're talking about in these dams. Relocating beavers, Bree just covered that. She went right through her slides. That they're territorial and all those different reasons. Disease transmission, it's illegal, relocating problems to other areas. So that's not an option. We can remove the beaver debris that's obstructing the dam, and we know that that will lower the water level in some of these impoundments. So we know that's going to happen. If there's a foot or two of beaver dam on top and we remove that, we're going to restore that impoundment to the level that it was historically designed to be. People will notice that. The water's going to be lower than what you may be accustomed to seeing it. But that's necessary. So that is an option. And we can remove beavers. And in some cases, we're going to have to do that because that's the option that's necessary to make sure that they don't keep impacting that structure. So that's what we've got to consider for the short term. For the longer term, one thing that's proposed when you have wildlife situations, like say bears, for example, that are getting into dumpsters or garbage cans, you can modify the habitat, change the situation, and the bears won't come anymore. You can exclude them, you can take away the food. In this case, the entire impoundment, the whole reservoir, the whole water body, the surrounding forest is the habitat. We can't modify at scale that entire area to make it undesirable for beavers. If they're there because it's suitable habitat, and we can't change the whole thing. In 1950, when the dam was built, there may have been no trees around that area, and it wasn't beaver habitat at all. But now here we are 75 years later, and it's perfect beaver habitat because there are trees growing, and it's a great food supply for the beavers, and that's the situation that we have to deal with now. So that's not an option. We could modify the dam, and Steve covered that quite well. That is something that we'll consider, and every dam is unique. So in each situation, it's going to require a study. How exactly does that dam operate? How are the beavers impacting it? You know, what exactly are the options? What could be done, if anything, to modify it? What's the engineering involved? What permits? And what's the cost? And that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. So that's a long-term solution that takes time and studies to figure out. We could remove the dam entirely. That's an option. And in some cases, that might be the best option. If that dam's not performing a useful function anymore on the landscape, and some are not, some are actually more of an impediment to aquatic organization passage and other things, we'll study that. We'll look at the potential impacts to recreation, ecological impacts, impacts to flood resilience, and we know that in some cases, the best thing to do is to remove that dam. Let the beavers have their habitat. Beavers will build their own dam on that site, like Steve described, and the pond will be restored, and it'll be beaver habitat, and it'll be a harmonious situation. That's a long-term option, and it's going to take study to do that, case by case, each dam. And finally, in the long term, we still may have to remove beavers, and that might be the only tool that's available at some of these sites. It might be the lowest cost, long-term potential option. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Delia, and we'll take your questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Completely off, Delia? You want?
I can take care of the projector if you want. I can take care of the projector if you want.
This is the part of the program.
The microphone.
Yes.
here you go.
Thank you. This is the part of the program where we're going to harvest your questions. We're not going to answer any of the questions tonight. As was said, the team wants to develop thoughtful answers and do research and all that kind of thing. So, but what we want to do is make sure that you don't leave here tonight wondering something. Because if you wonder it, for sure other people wonder it as well. So we want to harvest the questions, and then the answers will get developed and written up into a handout that you'll receive a copy of. So there are 3 ways to communicate your questions right now. You can ask them and I'll write them down, or you can write them on a sticky note and put them right over there on the wall. Looks like there are already some there. That's great. So, or you can email them to anr.fwpubliccomment@vermont.gov. And that's written there, and it's written over there as well. So let me just go get my markers while you remember your questions. And I'll just say that in asking a question, you're kind of doing a service because you're helping people who need the information that haven't heard this presentation. It's helping them to identify things they might think of. So I'm going to open the floor if you've got anything you'd like to ask. Yes?
Led you to conclude that beaver deceivers don't work?
One question. What led you to conclude that beaver deceivers don't work? Thank you. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I have a couple comments.
Just questions.
Have you consulted Skip Lyle about beaver deceivers? Because he has actually just been working on a dam site at Woodford State Park near Bennington. So, he's an expert on beaver deceivers. He's installed them all over the country at multiple sites, various different sites. And the other question I have is, I'm a licensed wildlife rehabilitator. Currently the only one who does beavers in Vermont. My real concern is if you trap now, from now until June, beavers are having newborn kids. And there's a reason why there's a trapping season.
So is your question, when would the trapping happen?
Because if you trap now, you're going to orphan a whole bunch of newborn kids who are either going to die of starvation in the lodge, or they're going to come to me, and I'm going to be inundated by kids. And I really don't want that to happen. So I'm really concerned about when that trapping will happen. And trapping is not really a solution. It's, when you trap out beavers, new beavers will just move in the next year.
Okay, so the question is, when would the trapping happen related to kids? Great. Thank you very much. Other questions? Yeah.
I have several questions.
Why don't you ask one, and then maybe we'll make sure other people will keep looping back around? Okay, you could. Well, why don't you, if you want to name one, and then you can also write someone sticky notes, unless you want them to be part of the video. Okay. Well, I can. Do you want to just do the first one? I don't want to. I mean,
they're all related.
Oh. Okay. So we'll come back to you then. Okay. Great. Other people. Yes.
Where is the risk assessment for specific dams published?
Where is the risk assessment for specific dams published? Okay, and other people? Yes.
Do the short-term options cited apply to all 21
So when you say do the short-term options cited apply to all 21 dams, do you mean do all of those options relate to all the dams?
I'm looking for a number breakdown, like how many dams are slated for restoration, how many for removal, how many for stopping, of the 21.
Okay. So it's kind of like which options go to which dams?
I
Yeah.
know there's just not one solution for all 21 dams.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And so the number relate to. Okay. Okay. These are all great questions. Yeah?
And on any of the dams, they've been identified by Fish and Wildlife as impacting a native fish passage, and like, therefore, which of those putting would be beneficial to the for fish.
Thank you. And again, I said this before, but I want to say it again. If you asked a question and I didn't write it down correctly, please let me know. I want to get it right. So, and I'm not sure. You said, are any of the 21 dams impacting native fish passage? And you'd said identified by, so do you mean officially or, yeah. 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 Great. And I will say that somebody, but I can't remember who it is I think taking detailed notes on a computer too, right? Somebody's doing that. So, more questions? Yes. Or actually, let me make sure there's not somebody else, and then we'll come back. No, okay, go ahead.
So whenever you hear trickling water, you see beavers. So why go to the expense, both moral and financial, of trapping when new beavers will just return?
Thank you. More questions?
I got another one.
Okay.
Why does dam safety use small riprap on pond dams that both fall into the water and increase water temperature, and also provide building blocks for industrious beavers? There are better ways to control erosion. Why doesn't dam safety use planting or other solutions?
Is that how you
I think you mean rip wrap.
Riprap.
R-I-P.
Riprap, okay. Let's see. Like,
You know, the riprap. Riprap like that. So why does dam safety use riprap? You had more details there of all the
that
problems.
on pond dams that both fall into the water and increase water temperature, and also provide the building blocks for industrious beavers.
Okay.
Why doesn't dam safety use other solutions?
Okay. Yes.
Is trapping currently used at A&R other than dams?
These are such great questions. Thank you, everybody, so much.
I got one more.
One more. Okay, go for it.
Okay, in the past, community groups have taken official and unofficial responsibility for successful beaver debris cleanout on dams. Will that still be an option? And won't that be a great solution for state agencies with limited time, personnel, and money? And why doesn't the state encourage and recruit community involvement?
Okay. Sir, do you want to? I'm sorry. Do you want to say some of yours, or do you want to send them as? Do you want to read them out just so they're in the video, and then send them as an email?
Some that are not going to make too much sense without much of the context data and research that I did. But
Okay.
I'd still like to read the questions.
But their questions let me just ask our team, rather than me writing them on the flip chart, does it make sense? At least they'll be part of the video if he just reads them and then he'll send them, they'll still be in the record. Okay. Go ahead. Nice and loud.
Given a 21% increase in annual precipitation since 1900 and a 52% projected increase of extreme rainfall events by 2100, how is Vermont updating its flood resilience plans? What role does the state believe natural infrastructure like beaver wetlands should play in these plans? Section 2. Studies show beaver dams reduce downstream peak flood flows by 30 to 60%. Has the state quantified the avoided infrastructure damage costs due to existing beaver wetlands? How much annual value does Vermont currently derive from beaver wetlands based on avoided flood damage and other services? 3. Coexistence devices like flow levelers cost $2,000 to $4,000 with an 8 to 10 year lifespan. How does the state justify repeated beaver removal over these long-term, low-cost solutions? Why is the state proceeding with beaver removal? I had 25 dams, but it's 21. With an estimate ecosystem services lost at a total of 1.75 million annually and 87.5 million over 50 years. I'd have to adjust that to 21. That's for 25 dams. Section 4, if beavers are removed, who will fund the 3 to 37.5 million needed over 10 years to replace only their flood control function? That's referring to their, replace the ecosystem,
Mhm.
what they do for, climate, whatnot. If all ecosystem services, flood control, water purification, biodiversity, carbon sequestration, groundwater recharge are to be replaced, are Vermont taxpayers prepared to fund the $27.5 million projected cost over 10 years for just 250 acres? The 250 acres is just based on like an average that the wetland where Beaver services is about 10 acres. There are obviously some that are like, maybe 18 to 20. There will always some that are obviously be more. I'm just going with some averages.
My guess is they won't be able to answer that question.
How does the state's current beaver management strategy align with Vermont's climate resilience goals and budget limitations? So notice there was, you mentioned 25 million, but some of just the projected, budget that we can, ultimately save is better with beavers than without them long term. In the Vermont Dam Safety Program, coordinating with the Beaver Wetlands Conservation Project and Agency of Natural Resources to find. Sorry. I hate reading off my phone.
Yeah, it's okay. Thanks a lot. I realize that I'm not sure the video is going to be able to hear you, but you're going to send them all in anyway.
Is the Vermont Dam Safety Program coordinating with the Beaver Wetlands Conservation Project and the Agency of Natural Resources to find integrated, cost-effective solutions? We already have a half answer on that. And then as far as just looking into the future, can the state commit to a statewide cost-benefit review comparing beaver coexistence strategies with full removal and artificial replacement of those services? So again, referring to the all the services that the beavers provide, carbon sequestration, water purification, etc. And then
Again, I'm guessing that's not one they're going to be able to answer. Okay.
I can send over as well. In light of projected $1 billion in long-term flood damage savings from beaver wetlands, will Vermont reconsider beavers as infrastructure partners, rather than liabilities?
Thank you. And you've got the address to send them in, right? Okay, great. Good. Thank you very much. Other questions that people have thought of in the meantime.
I just have one question. Do you suppose I could get an answer about where the risk assessment is for specific dams published tonight?
Yeah,
That's a simple information.
probably it is. Is it, she's just wondering if tonight she could get the answer on where the risk assessment for specific dams is published. That
It's middle of one of the handouts that has a link to the website.
Yeah, it's on there for specific dams, the
And
risk
if you take
management
this,
is one.
this map, has the dam identification numbers,
Right,
you can look them up there.
okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes.
Here's maybe a better question for the board. What acreage of wetlands are serviced by the 21 dams that have beavers right now? So what is just the total acreage? And how many beavers are we talking? So given that it can be anywhere from 2 to 8 beavers based on the information that was provided earlier.
Can you say the second repeat the second half of your question?
Oh, just how many beavers? How many acres and how many beavers would be impacted by the removal?
Okay. So there is a deadline if to submit your questions, which is May 2nd. So make sure that if you're going to email any more questions, you think of something on the way home, tomorrow morning when you're walking your dog, whatever, you want this and you want to email in a question, just make sure to do it by May 2nd. And then that gives them until June 1st. So they've got, basically a month to try to look at all the questions, weave them together. There'll be another set that'll come in on Thursday night from Middlebury, and that'll be summarized in a written handout. And I personally want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I think there's a special place in heaven reserved for people who come out to public meetings on Tuesday nights. It's a great thing to do. I appreciate your public involvement. And I don't know if anyone else wants to say a parting word.
I guess on behalf of the Agency of Natural Resources, I'll just offer my gratitude and appreciation for all of you joining us this evening. There's clearly a common theme to your questions and your comments, and I hope you can appreciate that there are shared values here. I mean, as the department who's responsible for the conservation of all species of plants and animals, beavers are right at the top of the list in terms of our level of appreciation for the important role that they play on the Vermont landscape, for biodiversity contributions, for climate and flood resilience, for all of the amazing benefits that they provide to the environment and to society. So very much a series of shared interests here, and we greatly appreciate the questions that you've asked because they're thought-provoking and they will help us to put together plans that hopefully will be in everyone's best interest. So thank all of you for your time this evening, and safe travels going home.